I was just mowing her lawn. That's it. Just another hot afternoon, another quiet client. Until her husband, who she swore had left for good, walked in through the front door and looked me dead in the eye. That single moment, it changed everything. You won't believe what really happened after that. Welcome to Vows and Betrayals, where we share true stories that test trust, loyalty, and the fragile lines between right and wrong. If you've ever been caught between what you feel and what you know is right, leave a dot in the comments. You're not alone. To those of you who've been listening to the stories on this channel, thank you. Your support means more than you know. And if you're new here, we're so glad you found us. Hit that follow button so you don't miss what's coming next. Now let's get into the story. They say every man carries the weight of his father, what he was or wasn't. For me, it was both. I was 10 when we buried him on a gray morning in January, the frost thick enough to crunch beneath our feet and the silence louder than the prayers. After that, it was just me and Mom in a trailer parked at the edge of a dusty service road outside Asheville, North Carolina. Mom worked long shifts at the diner. I worked on learning how to survive. I never had the patience for classrooms or lectures, but I loved building things, fixing things, making something ugly look proud again. When other kids were saving up for video games, I was fixing up an old mower I'd pulled from someone's junk pile. By 25, I didn't have a college degree, but I had a name, Blue Ridge Yard Works, a creaky Chevy Colorado, a beat-up trailer, and more determination than sense. I wasn't doing well, not yet, but I had business cards. I printed myself and a flyer I taped to every gas station pole from one end of town to the other. Most people walked past it, but one didn't. Her name was Elena Whitmore. She left a voicemail on a Wednesday morning, asking if I was available to quote a lawn job out in Northview Hills, a part of town I usually only saw when driving past real slow, wondering what it'd be like to live in a place with shutters that matched the mailbox. She sounded polished, sharp, a little too proper to be interested in a kid like me, with secondhand gear and dirt under his fingernails. But a job's a job. I called her back before the voicemail had even finished playing. She answered on the first ring. I pulled up to the house the next morning, just before 9 a.m. Still not sure if I was dreaming. Northview Hills looked like the kind of place where time moves slower, where retirees walked their dogs in matching fleece jackets and mailboxes had flower beds more polished than some wedding venues. Elena's house sat at the end of a curved cul-de-sac trimmed in white stone, with ivy climbing the columns like it had been painted there on purpose. I parked on the street. No way I was pulling my rusty trailer into a driveway that clean. I rang the bell. A wind chime tinkled somewhere above me. The door opened like a scene from a movie. She looked nothing like I expected. Mid-40s, maybe, but graceful. Not the high-maintenance perfume in the morning type, more like someone who'd read every book in the local library and still had time to water the plants. Casual jeans, cream, blouse hair tied loosely. Barely any makeup, just a hint of coral on her lips. "You must be Tyler," she said, smiling politely, but guarded. "Yes, ma'am. I mean Elena." I stumbled, flushing red. She chuckled softly. "That's me. And please don't call me ma'am. Makes me feel older than I am." She walked me around the yard, explaining the hedges that needed trimming, the dead patches in the lawn, the vines creeping up the fence line. She didn't hover, didn't instruct like most clients. She trusted me to see what needed doing. I got to work. The sun was already high, and sweat dripped into my eyes within minutes. but I pushed through clean lines on the edges, sharp corners on the flower beds, hand weeding, even where I didn't have to. I wanted it to look better than new. I wanted her to notice, and she did. An hour and a half in, I looked up and saw her standing on the porch, holding 2 glasses of iced tea. She didn't wave, just smiled. When I came up to take one, she handed it over and said quietly, "You take pride in what you do. I respect that." I nodded, wiping my forehead. Then she tilted her head just slightly and added with a half smile, "Careful. I get attached to hard workers." I kept coming back. Every week or so, Elena would text me with another task, mulching pruning power, washing the walkway. I never said no. Part of it was the money. She paid well and always on time. But if I was honest, it wasn't just that. There was something about her calm. She never rushed a conversation, never filled silence with small talk. She asked real questions. What made me start the business? Did I ever think of leaving Asheville? Did I believe in second chances I'd find myself answering before I even realized it? We started having iced tea together after I finished a job. Then lunch. One afternoon, it rained unexpectedly while I was halfway through trimming the back hedges. Elena opened the door and waved me inside without hesitation. "You'll catch cold," she said. No arguments. That was the first time I sat in her kitchen longer than 10 minutes. The place was beautiful, airy and warm, with art on the walls and soft jazz playing somewhere in the background. She moved around the room with the kind of grace that comes from someone who's lived a lot of life and learned how to survive it. As we talked, I noticed things, little details, an extra chair always set at the dining table, a framed photo turned backward on a bookshelf, and then half tucked beneath a stack of unopened mail, a letter addressed to Mrs. Elena Whitmore. The return address read Martin Whitmore, Baton Rouge, L.A. I didn't say anything, but something shifted in me. She'd told me her husband was out of the picture, that they had grown apart years ago. I'd filled in the blanks with what I wanted to believe, but that letter told a different story, a story still unfolding. And I started wondering, was I helping a client or stepping into someone else's unfinished chapter? The letter stayed in my mind like a stain I couldn't scrub out. I didn't ask Elena about it. Maybe I should have. But how do you ask a woman who's been nothing but kind? Whether she's lying by omission, I kept working for her, careful, reserved now. I spoke less. I stopped staying for tea. But every time she called, I still showed up. Partly because I needed the work. Partly because I wasn't ready to walk away. Then the whispers started. First it was Mrs. Chambers, the elderly neighbor 2 houses down. She'd always sit near her bay window with binoculars and a cup of black tea. One morning, as I was unloading my tools, she called out to me from the porch. "You've been spending a lot of time over there, Tyler." I paused. "Just helping out where I can, ma'am." She gave a tight-lipped smile. "Helping, huh? That's what they call it these days." I forced a laugh, but my gut tightened. That week, 2 other jobs I'd lined up in the neighborhood fell through. One family said they found someone else. Another didn't return my calls. By the 3rd no-show, I got the message. People were talking. Not about my work. About me. About her. And in small towns like ours, image is everything. Elena seemed unfazed. When I told her what was happening, she just shook her head. "People gossip when they're bored, Tyler. It's not your job to fix their stories." Maybe she was right. But the next time she asked me to stay for lunch, I said no. Not out of anger. Out of self-preservation. There was a storm building, and I could feel it crawling under my skin. I wasn't sure where I stood anymore, or if I'd already stepped somewhere I shouldn't have. It was a Saturday afternoon hot, still one of those days where even the clouds looked too tired to move. Elena had texted me about the backyard. The garden needed some love. The patio was dusty. The vines were creeping again. I said I'd come by around 3. When I pulled into the street, her front porch light was already on, even though the sun was still high. I didn't think much of it. She greeted me the usual way. Casual, soft smile, slight tilt of the head. She wore a light blue shirt tucked into jeans, barefoot on the porch. Her hair was pinned up like she tried to look effortless and still somehow looked perfect. We walked the property. She pointed, I nodded. It felt normal, familiar, safe almost. That should have been the warning. I was halfway through, spraying down the stone tiles on the back patio when she called me in for iced tea. I didn't hesitate. We sat in the kitchen. The breeze moved through the screen door, and for a second, the world felt small and peaceful again. She asked about my mother, about my business, and I answered in half sentences, tired, sunburned, distracted by the way she listened. That's when it happened. The sound of a key turning in the front door. Both of us froze. Footsteps. Firm, measured. Not confused like someone entering the wrong house. No knock. No warning. Then the voice. Male. Calm. Older. Elena. She stood slowly, set her glass down. Then turning to me with a flat kind of calm, she said, "You should stay seated." A tall man entered the kitchen. Tan blazer gray at the temples, expensive watch. He looked at me. Not shocked, just taking stock. "And who's this?" he asked. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Elena stepped in. "Martin, this is Tyler. He's been helping with the yard." He didn't blink, just stared at me and said almost casually, "Helping." Right. That single word dropped like a hammer. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying the way Martin looked at me, not with anger, but with certainty, like he already knew the kind of man I was, or thought I was. And Elena, she never flinched, never explained, just sat down like nothing had happened. The next few days I stayed away. I threw myself into other jobs, mowed half a dozen lawns, repainted a fence, power washed a brick wall till my arms went numb. Anything to keep my mind from circling back to that kitchen, that one word, helping. Then on Wednesday morning, I got a text. "Would you come by this afternoon? I made something for you." Elena. I should have said no, but I didn't. When I arrived, she met me on the porch with a small smile and a stack of papers in her hand. "I know things have been strange," she said, "but I've been thinking about your business. I believe in what you're doing, and I'd like to help." I looked down at the papers. Financial breakdowns equipment quotes a loan proposal already half written. "I could wire the money this week," she added. I blinked, stunned. "Elena, that's generous, but I can't accept." She cut me off gently. "I don't want interest. I don't want repayment." "Then I can't take it," I said more firmly now. "Not unless it's a loan. With terms." She stepped closer. Her voice softened. "Tyler, what if I'm not offering just because of your business?" And there it was. The twist I hadn't been ready for. She wasn't handing me a check. She was handing me a door, an invitation, a blurred line. I took a long breath, looked her in the eye. "Elena?" "I can't." She nodded slowly. A sadness passed behind her smile, but she didn't argue. "I figured you'd say that," she whispered. That's probably why I wanted to offer. I didn't hear from Elena for a few weeks after that. No texts, no missed calls, just silence. I kept working quietly, steadily. My business didn't explode overnight, but word began to spread. The old couple on Maple Street told their son. He told his neighbor. Jobs started coming in again, not because I handed out more flyers, but because I'd earned something harder trust. I applied for a small business loan, bought a used but decent van, upgraded my equipment. Not flashy, just reliable. Things started to move. I even hired a kid from down the road part-time, just like I'd once wished someone would do for me. One afternoon, late October, I saw her again. She was standing outside her house when I came to trim the hedges, something she'd scheduled through my website, not by phone. Her hair was shorter now. A little silver showed at the roots, still graceful. She smiled when she saw me, warm but distant, like someone waving to a boat she knew wouldn't dock. I worked quietly. She didn't offer iced tea. When I was done, I packed up and started walking back to the truck. "Tyler," she called. I turned. "I'm glad it's working out for you," she said. "You built something real." I nodded. "I couldn't have done it without you." Her voice softened. "You would have. I just gave you a nudge." We stood there a second longer, nothing left, to fix no words that hadn't already been said. I left without looking back. But as I drove away, I realized something. Sometimes, the most important people in our lives aren't the ones we end up with. They're the ones who showed up right before we crossed a line and reminded us who we really are. There are stories we never tell out loud because they don't fit into neat boxes. They weren't romances. They weren't tragedies. But they changed us anyway. This was one of mine. Elena never crossed a line, and neither did I. But the space between almost and too far, that's where the real lessons live. I learned that gratitude is not the same as obligation, that kindness isn't a promise, and that sometimes the right thing to do is the thing that costs you comfort. If you've ever had a relationship that never had a label but left a mark, tell me in the comments, even if it's just a single dot. Let's not pretend these quiet chapters don't matter. Thank you for listening to this story, and if it's your first time here, welcome to Vows and Betrayals. Subscribe if you want more stories that make you feel something real. We'll be here, always.